Hey guys, Taxagothy here. This is going to be my second exotic weapon video. In this video I'll be talking about the Molten Edict, which is an exotic hammer. It is an exotic hammer based off of Charog. Now, I do not recall how you get the exotic now, as I did play this pre-reforge, but I'm running the Molten Edict with Antique Clip, Berserker, Cunning, Knockout King, Molten, Overpower, and Rage. And I am running Revenant as well. I'm also running Skarn's Lantern for the shields, and I was being a bit dumb and deciding to go run an escalation at level 13, which you'll see by this video that wasn't much of a problem considering the amount of damage that the Molten Edict does, because it does do overall AoE damage. Due to that AoE damage, that's why I decided to run Cunning as my crit cell as opposed to Pulse. I figured Pulse might work, but as the lava ball hits, I wasn't sure if it was going to eat up the Pulse crit, so I decided to just run Cunning instead. Since Hammer is naturally going to do stagger damage, I figured I would throw Knockout King and Overpower on there so that I could get the max amount of damage from staggered behemoths. And while a behemoth is staggered, that lava ball will have a chance to do a lot more damage as it passes through the behemoth. Revenant, I decided to run that with Rage. Typically, if I'm going to run Revenant, I do like to run Rage. Same thing with Fire and Rage, because since it eats up health, or for Fire, shields, if you do have shields before health, it will cause Rage to trigger. But also, at the same time, it doesn't cause Predator to stop triggering. So, that being said, I did try originally running this build with Predator on it, and I did a couple different versions. This was a build that taught me to stay away from the cell Reduce. As you may have noticed, I do put Reduce onto a lot of my builds, but since Reduce does affect your attack speed in exchange for damage, sometimes it's not the best option to run, because if you're not putting out consistent attack speed, you're not getting a good DPS overall. Sometimes I will choose Berserker over Reduce, and the weapon naturally has Berserker on it, so it only made sense to throw another Berserker onto it as well. And because the continuous damage stacks, as the lava ball passes through the behemoth, it will be doing continuous damage itself because of the AoE that it does. Sometimes I find myself with the dilemma of having a utility slot that I don't know what to do with. I did try a couple different combinations, including Reuse, which typically I would prefer to run Assassin's Frenzy over Reuse, as it is slightly better. However, Assassin's Frenzy is an Alacrity cell, and Reuse is the Insight cell, and the Lantern is naturally going to have an Insight cell slot on it. So, due to running Reuse and feeling that it was not the best possible option, I decided to throw Molten on there because Molten is going to have a dual use. Molten is going to give me the increased attack speed as well as fire protection. Now, I did have the idea to take this build into Blaze Escalation and run it, but since I'm not as confident running Revenant as well as Berserker, and I tend to get greedy with my attacks and get myself hit, I was unsuccessful in completing the escalation. But I was still doing significant damage against Blaze Behemoths, despite this being a Blaze type weapon. Overall, I'm not a huge fan of exotic weapons, but I do like the Molten Edict. It does have a bunch of possibilities. I have tried a few different versions of this build, and this was the best option overall, and I'm always very happy when I can get all +6s on a build, and this was one of those cases. I do feel that Molten is a huge lifesaver with this, considering that Berserker is on it, and when you are running the active ability of Revenant, you do not have any lifesteal, only passively. So say you're running a hunt and you get on fire, it is going to affect you. Now, this build is also running Tragic Echo, which, out of the exotic armor pieces, some of them do feel a little bit outdated. Tragic Echo is one of those that has consistently been good, and even so, you can take it into trials, and as long as you kill the behemoth while you're still in Tragic Echo state, it will count for all 3 marks. But that is something I can talk about separately. Tragic Echo does work well with this build because the amount of DPS that the Molten Edict puts out, as well as Revenant. You can run Tragic Echo with this and get that 100% damage bonus if for whatever reason you die. And since I'm not so confident with Berserker or Revenant, it was just a bonus for me. The issue I ran into with the Blaze escalation was I did die too many times, and even though I was getting that damage increase, I was not able to complete it. I did end up screwing up and getting killed by Torgadoro. That does not mean that this build is bad, it's just one of those where you have to have a little bit more restraint when you go after the behemoths. You can't get too greedy with your attacks, and I really enjoyed making this build because it was teaching me a little bit of restraint when I was fighting, and I would learn to dodge a little bit more. It also gave me the motivation to run Discipline, so I will be doing a video on Discipline as well, and if anybody has any tips or tricks for me, I would greatly appreciate it because I am losing my mind with that one. This is making me enjoy Revenant a lot more, and this is a build that I would probably run again. Clearly, as you can see, I am running this in Frost Escalation, which I have said is not the best way to test a build. It's just the way you can see the max amount of damage that you can put out. I wasn't even getting the greatest of amps either, so I'm sure it could have been better. But after I run this Frost Escalation, which went surprisingly well for being a lower level, I decided to take it into Twilight Sanctuary Hunting Grounds and test it out. You'll see that it is not quite as effective in Twilight, but as long as you can stay consistent with having restraint and dodging, you will be able to produce a lot of damage. And if you do not have enough time to do a combo to get off the lava ball, what you can do is stand back and shoot a lava ball at them like that. I found that it can do an insane amount of damage, especially when you're in your Revenant state, if you just shoot the lava ball and then just keep reloading. Since I am running this with Antique Clip, it does limit the amount of ammo that I have, but it was honestly the most enticing clip to have on there because of that 300% damage increase from Aether Charged ammo. Also, I do want to add that I am not a hammer main. I am by no means good at hammer, and since I do play on controller, I'm well aware that each of the combos are sensitive by the joystick. Since I do play on Nintendo Switch, there are some instances where I have stick drift. As of right now, my current controller does not have it, but I do have a habit of also pushing up on the controller when I do my combos, so it's a very hard habit to break. I apologize if my combos look a little sloppy. It is a weapon I'm still trying to get familiar with. I would like to master hammer, so that's another thing. If anyone has any tips or tricks, I would greatly appreciate it, because I do think that the Molten Edict is a very good weapon, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't like exotics. Originally, when I landed on Twilight, there was a Bloodshot Shroud event up. I went to go do the event, and it did not go very well. I might save the clips and post some bloopers later, but I feel bad for the person that I had struggling with me there. This Stormclaw was already at about 30% danger when I got here and was Aether Charged, so he was giving me quite the hard time and kept summoning his lightning storms. Fun fact for anyone that may not know, if you do break the horns off of Stormclaw, he will not be able to make those storm clouds anymore, and you will not have to worry about being struck by lightning. Can't say the same for in real life. Be careful out there. This person was already fighting Shroud, but I decided to go help him out with it. And it was here that I learned that you cannot interrupt behemoths with the lava ball. Now, I'm sure if you put weighted strikes on there, you might be able to, but I found out the hard way that the lava ball does not interrupt behemoths. But if you can time your swing just right, you'll be able to. And also, you have to have the timing just right, but Revenant can also interrupt behemoths. So you do have some somewhat reliable interrupts with that, but as long as you're consistently putting out damage with the Molten Edict, you may not even need to interrupt the behemoths if you can keep them stagger locked. Due to the nature of exotic weapons, as you know, you cannot bond exotic weapons to the legendary weapons, and you cannot transmog the exotic weapons. Each exotic weapon will come with a set cell slot, this one being Brutality, and one prismatic slot where you can put whatever you want into it. So that does cause some limitations with your builds. This was definitely a weapon where I didn't have as many limitations and I was able to try a few different methods. And even though not each one worked, it does allow you to kind of branch out and try some new things with the Molten Edict. Out of all the exotic weapons, this is definitely one of the better ones. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if there are any tips and tricks you have for a non-hammer user to get good.